Hello.
Oh, hey.
Welcome to Chronicles of the Phoenix, the podcast.
The podcast.
One day I want to have, when you listen to those shows where they have that button you can push if you're on the radio and it's just a pre-recorded thing. I want it to be the podcast. That's what I want to do.
Yes.
But maybe in a more voice like my own instead of a man voice.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be the podcast.
Well, Impulsive Girl wants you to do that as soon as you come back from vacation.
I think I can figure that out.
I think you can too. Maybe on vacation.
Maybe while I'm away, you can figure it out.
I feel like we've established that audio is not my jam. It's your wheelhouse.
You're right. I'm
a visual girl.
I'll brainstorm on vacation, and we're going to start having some sound bites in our show.
Yeah.
That we push when we want to.
Ooh. Oh, that'll be so fun.
Do you have one you want? What are you oohing about?
I don't know. I'll brainstorm all the sound bites I want. I'm going to ask my kids to play.
All right.
There's some really, oh gosh, I keep seeing old videos of my kids and Hayden's voice when he was little. It was the cutest little voice. I feel like some of the sound bites might be his voice.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any good things, weird things that he said? You'll have to go looking. That's what you'll do when I'm on vacation.
That's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we have a plan.
I think so, too.
Stay tuned, everyone.
Yes. And if you have some sound bites you think we should have, send them in.
We've got some work to do.
I think so. So today we're going to be talking about the difference between a warning sign and a worry story. How to make decisions when anxiety, intuition, and uncertainty all sound the same. And I feel like our podcast is often thematic in what we're dealing with in our life and in our practices and stuff like that. And it's certainly something that has been coming forward for me in my practice. And also, I think something that as I'm in different transitions in my life, have to be discerning of, is this anxiety? Is my intuition telling me something? And kind of being able to tell the difference. So I think some of the questions that we think about is have you ever found yourself wondering, is this your intuition or is this your anxiety talking? Right?
Right. And how to know the difference, because I think it's hard sometimes to tell. And I think that I've talked about this before on this pod, but I did an intuitive reading over the phone once with somebody. And one of the things that she said to me was that I do have a very strong intuition, which aligns with my Enneagram, because that's my center of intelligence is gut and intuition. But she straight up called it out. And she's like, you need to start reading books about intuition and how to tap into your intuition, because she was like, your anxiety just completely blocks it. And it was the first time I'd thought of it like that, because I was like, well, what do you mean? And she explained it by saying that you have a very strong intuition, but you're not going to know when to listen to it if what's happening in your head all the time are your anxious thoughts. And so when your head is in that space, it's a lot harder to tap into what your body is telling you or what your gut sense is. And I feel that in myself all the time, because when I get stuck in my head and I'm my thoughts are loud, I do think it's hard to hear almost anything else.
Well, and that's the difference, right? That is how you can tell the difference between intuition and anxiety. Is anxiety's in your head. Intuition is more body-based, right? And it can be about a business decision, a relationship, a parenting choice, a difficult decision, a risk that you're considering, a next step you're afraid to take. Maybe you've been hurt in relationships before and you're considering taking a chance on a relationship again. And you're trying to decide, everything in you feels like this is different this time. But something's telling you not to leap, but what is that, So we wanted to spend some time kind of analyzing that and looking at that today. And I think most people aren't taught how to interpret their internal experiences. We were taught, trust your gut, but don't be emotional. Think logically, but stop overthinking. So we were taught very contradictory things. And nobody really explained how those things work together.
Sure.
Which I think makes people end up doubting yourself and maybe freezing. And so why do you think most people struggle to trust themselves?
I think it depends on where you struggle. I know we reference the Enneagram a lot, but if I think about what someone who's an Enneagram 1 who's pretty self-critical might struggle with is if you think of what thoughts are running through their heads, typically, it's going to be a lot of judgment on themselves, towards themselves, right? So I'd imagine for an Enneagram 1, it's really hard to trust yourself because the voice that you're hearing is often through a self-critical lens. And so I guess when I discern trust with yourself, I'd imagine that sometimes that voice is very loud. And so you're listening, right? If you were to think of that as an anxious thought, you'd be listening to that more so than you're listening to real feedback that you're giving yourself because they're not objective enough. It's coming from you. And I think that plays out with every type of personality. I think like we talked about in the last episode related to how you can come back to a part of yourself or be authentic. I shared how my personality has this tough thing with authenticity because I can sort of meld into what other people like or take their opinions on. And so for someone like me, I know it's hard to trust myself because it's hard to hear that voice inside of me that is really my knowing and my intuition because it's clouded by a lot of other things like making sure everything's going smoothly, that people like me, that I'm showing up a certain way. I'm doing a lot of that type of narrative more so than listening to an inner knowing that I have. So I guess to summarize that, I would say whatever your struggle is, right, whatever your go-to thing is that kind of comes at a cost for you, I think can interrupt the process of taking real feedback and data in and believing in that yourself.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that anxiety is story-based, right? And it's like the story that you're telling yourself, but it feels so factual. And oftentimes it's a story you've told yourself over and over again. And sometimes it's reinforced by society or it's reinforced by family lore or friends. And so some of the time, like that's what the conversations that I'll have with clients in the therapy space is when they'll bring something forward and I'll say, is that a story you're telling yourself or is that real? To help me have the data to support it so that we can unpack that if it's like this person is X, and then you can kind of dispel some of the myths from that when you recognize that, oh, it's a story I'm telling myself. And maybe it's been a story that I've been telling myself for 30 years. And that's fueled by anxiety. And it begs you to ask questions like, what if I fail? Or what if they don't like me? What if I regret this? What if everything goes wrong? And another thing that I think about a lot with anxiety is it's very future focused. It's extremely repetitive. There's a sense of urgency about it. It's catastrophic and it's certainty seeking.
Yeah. So we're trying to sort of have this, I can predict the future. And if I can do that, it gives me a little bit of control when really spending all that time and energy there doesn't actually get us what we're looking for. I think everything you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I've talked with a lot of people about that same process of recognizing the stories we tell ourselves become our reality.
Yes.
And we live in our heads. And so it is so strong. It does feel real sometimes until there is a space like this where you're kind of called out and call into question whether those thoughts are true. And whether you can prove something or not isn't as important, but recognizing that there's sort of an alternative here that could be presenting itself. But I'm curious when you describe that, like what you think happens when anxiety becomes the primary decision maker for somebody.
I mean, I think that it can immobilize you. I think that when I think about people in my life that are driven by anxiety, I think that they are, I'm thinking about one person in particular who is a very beautiful, intelligent, charismatic soul. But the story that she tells herself is that she's not likable, or that other people are more likable than she is, or that they would prefer to be with others than with her.
Okay.
And so what that results in is this sort of fear-based experience in all situations where she rehearses over and over again conversations. And so there's a delay in speaking and engaging in conversations. There's hesitation to reach out. There's a disconnect or not willingness to even reach out to people that have very clearly said, you are important to me. I appreciate you. I value you. The story she tells herself is, I'm not enough. Other people are more important than me. And so therefore they don't want to be with me. So I'm not going to reach out to them. Those stories result in missing out.
Right, because that thought becomes so primary that it drives both the feeling and the behavior.
Correct.
So if that thought is, oh, other people are more likable than me, most of the time that's going to leave us feeling like self-conscious and overwhelmed or maybe disconnected. So that reluctance to put yourself out there, the reluctance to reach out, to feel valued, all of that, it sort of results in more of a shutdown, as opposed to if that narrative were different, that decision could look very different. If there was data to help make that decision, right? And I think that's a piece of what we'll talk about next, is what intuition looks like for us. But when we're able to take feedback internally and also look externally to what feedback we're getting from people, just like you described, it sounds like there are people who are saying, like, I value you, I show up for you, I care about you, that could directly dispute that thought. And it's different when the thought's driving, the thought still wins.
Right, because anxiety often mistakes uncertainty for danger. So even if previously there had been data that there was value within the relationship, there isn't certainty at that exact given point. So then the story of I'm not valued, I'm not important is the primary driver. So anxiety wins.
And I'd rather have the certainty of my story be what it is, which keeps me doing what I'm doing, than to challenge that for the risk of what if I'm wrong, and that isn't, or what if I'm actually right, I guess is what it is. And
what if they don't like me? What if I fail?
Yep.
What if everything goes wrong? So I'll play it safe and stay in my own bubble.
Yeah. And so intuition is different than that. It's really informed by our experience, pattern recognition, nervous system awareness, our accumulated wisdom, and our internal sense of knowing. And so sometimes I think when we can get ourselves into a space where we're listening to our intuition, when I think of thoughts running and anxiety, to me that feels loud. It feels like it's in my head. I can't get it out. I'm like trying to shut it down. But intuition comes in moments where it's quieter for me. Things feel steadier. There's less of a repetitive nature to it. It's not something that's like screaming out to me. Of course, sometimes I think our gut responses are like, can be loud, but I think it's less like perseverative and potentially like less dramatic and felt in your body first.
As an intuitive person, where do you feel it in your body?
I definitely get an actual gut feeling, stomach feeling. And I've talked about this even in my own therapy, like how to know where things are coming from and where it shows up in my body. Because I know when I'm in an anxious space, it's, yes, I'm thinking, but I feel it's more like chest driven, like heart, like maybe racing heart a little bit, or like I start to feel more keyed up and activated. And that's more of like a chest experience for me. But intuition shows up more at a gut level. It just feels deeper, I guess, is the only way I would describe that. It feels like a twinge that shows up and kind of gets my attention. But I agree with the way we're talking about the quietness and steadiness. Like, it's mostly apparent to me when I'm really listening and I create enough quiet to hear it.
What's interesting for me as I've been more attuned and aware is that I don't know if I feel it necessarily so much in my body, but being more of an Enneagram headspace, it's more just this like gut intuition of just, I know that this is it, right? Like this sort of almost cognitive, like this is the right path, or this is the right, do you know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily body based, but it's more like an intuitive feeling of
alignment.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. And I think you check in with that well. And that grounds me because you did it recently when we were talking about something and you were texting me and you were like, okay, here's my gut check. Here's what I really think. Because I think, right, we have a business together. We're trying to make decisions all the time for that. And I think we've really started to define when we run into the thought space and our anxiety bubbles up first. And then it's like, pause for a second and let's like check in with what's underneath that or what we're really feeling or what feels right. And I think we started to narrate that a little bit sometimes.
Sure.
Because I think, like anyone, we can get into this little bit of tug of war in our own heads, or like, do we say yes to this thing? Are we doing this the right way? Right? That's all a lot of thought-based, experience. And not that you can't have intuition about it, but I think my process tends to be like, yeah, I ping around all these ideas and thoughts, and sometimes they are very anxiety driven. And then when I can kind of get through all of that, then it's like, okay, hold on. What is my knowing saying? Like, what feels aligned for me? What feels aligned for us and what we're trying to accomplish here? And that helps me make meaning of it and understand where to go.
Yeah. And to me, like the steadiness, and I think when I'm anxious, I'm ruminating and I can't let it go. But I feel like when I'm in alignment and it's more coming from an intuitive place, it's not in that rumination place. I'm able to just know it and move through it. And I like this key insight of anxiety tells stories, intuition gives us information. And when I think about that is data, for me at least, and that's the information part of it, data is helpful in creating alignment and knowing that I'm moving forward in the right direction and making good decisions. Where stories are narratives that can sometimes be created from my own imagination, or creations that could be made up. And I think your nervous system is something that we talk about a lot and we tap into. And I think our histories, whether it's positive, negative, traumatic, our nervous systems respond to our histories and what happens. And many people either ignore their nervous systems or trust every nervous system response as a command. And anything in extreme is problematic.
Right. Yep.
So what we talk about a lot is that our nervous system is another data system that's providing information. It deserves attention, but it isn't the only data system. So it's just something that you should listen to as one data source. And
it doesn't always point to an answer, right?
Yes.
And I think that's, to me, if we break this down, I feel like what happens with thoughts is it's like there's, just like you're saying here with the nervous system in terms of responding to a command, right?
Yeah.
I would view a lot of anxiety as it's giving us a command in some way or telling us a story, which oftentimes does have some form of action, whether it's don't reach out to that person, they don't like you.
Right.
You're not wanted, don't do that. That's going to be stupid if you call that person and want them to come invite them over and then they're going to tell you no. Versus the data you can get from your nervous system. It's not saying, you better call your friend because you know you're better than that, blah, blah. It's not giving you a narrative like that. It's just going, okay, when I'm checking in with myself and I actually listen, like if I move out of my head and I trust my gut, what my gut says is I feel really comfortable with that person. They bring me joy in my life. They've heard some of my hard stuff and they've still shown up for me. So I'm going to take that data. There's someone I feel more calm with and connected to, and recognize that that means I can lean in and maybe take a risk. The gut itself or the nervous system as well isn't giving you that information that says you better do this. Take the risk. It's fine. It's just giving you the information.
And then you have to interpret it.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you're thinking about that, how do you know the difference between a warning sign and a worry story?
I think what we do is we try to gather that information from all the sources, right? So I think for our internal data, we're checking in with body sensations, our emotions, energy shifts, tension, excitement, right? Like just taking a read and a pulse on your internal data from in a body-based way. And then I think there's also external data that we look at, like feedback, evidence for what we're thinking about, timing, resources, right? Patterns and trusted perspectives. So really not taking any one source as truth, and that's the end all be all, but
Sure.
compiling it all and trying to understand whether what you're hearing, right? Whether it is a warning sign or a worry story, the data that you're getting, can it sort of be replicated across multiple sources? That's how I would determine that.
No, that makes sense. How do you factor that in place and time? And what I mean by that, meaning like who you are today versus who you were 20 years ago, and reconciling maybe some of your data points and how they would have factored in to you 20 years ago versus how they are today and how you make decisions now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what you're asking, is if we've made decisions at a certain time, but we don't know it at the time, but it's really worry driven and you're following that worry story, you may not have the perspective at the time to know that's what you're doing. But then later on, when you gain perspective and a better understanding of yourself or a more authentic version of yourself, you might recognize that things you've done have been based in worry, fear, right? Things that weren't necessarily like the internal or external data points that you have. So I would say a piece of that is understanding as humans, I think most people are inherently trying to do the best they can with what they have at the time. And I know that's a difficult thing to think about sometimes because there's also some people who've done a lot of harm and I think have really hurt us. And so it can be hard to think about that. But I think even when you just view it from your own individual lens about yourself, I think we have to give ourselves grace for that version of ourselves and why we were doing what we were doing at the time. And whatever gets us to the place now where we might see it differently doesn't mean we have to change that or feel regret about it or blame ourselves for the decisions we've made. It's more so understanding the pattern and why maybe at that time the worry story was winning. And maybe now you're in a place where that warning sign is more something you can tap into.
That makes a lot of sense. Have you noticed that difference?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I don't know. For me, it's strongest when I think we all have like, you can tell me if you do, but I think I definitely have moments throughout my life where I have that like moment of shame twinge of like, oh my God, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
oh, I said that thing and I got called out for it. And even though it wasn't what I meant, like it feels awful that happened, right? Like these moments where, and for me, that's a big part of it is because I try very hard to be nice and have people like me and do the right thing. And so for me, that's like a big trigger is to think back on these moments where I did something wrong. And maybe in that moment, I couldn't even really own it because it was like so overwhelming. And in my position today, I can look back and still feel that feeling, but I can also recognize how I would do it differently, how I might own it differently, how I could not react to my own worry story, which at that time would have been, oh my gosh, you see me in a negative light now. Like now you don't like me. I have to defend myself. I have to tell you how much I didn't mean to say, whatever it is, versus what it might look like now to just have accountability and be like, oof, that probably really rubbed you the wrong way, and acknowledge that could be hurtful, or acknowledge that like I made a mistake and be okay saying that.
Well, and I think that I've had periods in my life, certainly when I was younger, that I was more focused on like crowdsourcing and more focused on the external data and less focused on the internal data. And then the consequences of that would then shift more to the worry story. And then maybe times where I didn't focus enough on the external data and too much on the internal data. So I think one of the things that I've learned and try to support people in my practice is that balance and that wise mind that we talk about in DBT of wise decision making requires both internal and external information.
Right. rolling with just one doesn't really give us what we need.
And that, anxiety tends to push people in one of two directions, either in avoidance or impulsivity. And if you're in avoidance, you're overthinking, you're delaying, you're waiting forever, you're seeking certainty. As we talked about in impulsivity, which is more island, you're acting quickly, you're escaping discomfort, or you're rushing decisions.
I talk to people about that a lot. And I find, and I like it in this context for looking at it from an anxiety perspective, because one of the things that's come up a lot in some of the work I've been doing is because I think that, right, like you said, you kind of lean toward impulsive, I lean toward avoidant. That's probably my core place to be. However, I really do think there can be a mix of both that people operate under. And I've found that when I talk with people about this, I've been getting a lot of people who say that, like in one area, if they're like, well, here's where I'm avoiding. And so what we talk a lot about is spending time in, like, if I'm stuck in avoidance and that keeps me so stuck in my head, then the way to get out of that is to move into action.
Sure.
And so, and you and I see that all the time. This is why I think we partner so well, is I can have as much avoidance in my head as I want, but I know you're going to help move me to action most of the time if I'm stuck there. In the same way that I think we've developed this balance of, if you're jumping in, that I can kind of put the brakes on for a second, like, hold on, let's think about this, like, let's whatever, and when reshape where we're going. And so I talk about this a lot in terms of opposite action. And so, like, what you end up doing is sort of creating enough space to then act in the opposite way of what you're tending towards. So if I'm avoiding most things, if I know I want to get healthy and go to the gym, but every day I'm making excuses in the morning and telling myself like why I can't, and I'm avoiding, then I know my action needs to be like quite literally Nike, like just do it. Get up, wear your clothes to bed the night before, put your shoes next to your bed and get them on and go. Like there can't be thought. Once the thoughts start, it's like, forget about it. I already have too many excuses. But then I also think there's times where the opposite is happening. And the flip side is jumping into making a decision or moving through the discomfort quickly by acting. But if we're going in that direction, oftentimes the way to navigate that is to just pause, spend time in the thinking, check in with the nervous system, find that knowing, and then make your decision. And as long as you're giving yourself that little bit of space to make that choice, I care less about what the choice is. I say this to people all the time. Like, if you still choose to do the thing that you were originally going to do, and maybe that was being impulsive, that's fine, as long as you've given yourself that space to interrupt your automatic process.
Yeah. I mean, because, right, I think the impulsivity is like, I'm uncomfortable with this anxious feeling that I'm having, and I just want to discharge the feeling. So I'm going to move to action quicker than I've actually allowed myself to really gut check to know like what is even the right choice for me.
Right.
So in the past, when I've done that, I've made the wrong choice because I haven't slowed down to do that. And so that's exactly right. Like, it could, to your point, a lot of times it might work out for me and have ultimately been the right decision, or I can course correct it and get it to the right decision. But I would have saved heartache if I had just paused. And I think it's why we need mirrors and programs like Cojourn, or the program that we're developing called the Leadership Lab is such an important project, because it allows us to have other people that can help us get out of our own way, because we're just too close to our own stories.
Right. And give us both that external data, but also kind of challenge, I think, some of the thoughts that we have. Because I think it's hard sometimes to discern your internal data points, like we talked about, and separate that from your thinking. And I think what we know about community, accountability, another human being who does not live in our head and does not hear what we're saying to ourselves.
Right.
It's a direct contradiction to what we're thinking, or at the very least, another external data point to show us a different vantage point on what we're doing.
Well, and one of the things that I love about like you being basically, we'll say, my Cojourn partner informally, is that one of the things about that is that it's not about solution based, right? Like you're not offering me a fix, but you're offering me a window and offering me perspective on maybe the data. And if I'm saying like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, and you're able to say, well, here's some of the data that I'm seeing too. You're also a trusted advisor, and you're someone that is willing to be radically honest with me and give me hard truths that like maybe sometimes aren't the most pleasant to hear, but I trust you and I'm willing to hear them because I want to be able to make the best decision going forward.
Or be the best version of yourself.
Be the best version of myself.
Yeah.
So, and like I've shared in the past, like I think some of the places that it's been the most beneficial for me is with parenting. You know, is that like I can get really stuck, but I want to be the best version of myself. And you have such a great, beautiful perspective. And I know you care about me and you can see the struggle and you're willing to like offer me really great perspective and help me see the blind spots that I don't see. And it's been transformative. It's like super helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's when you mention what we're embarking on with our leadership lab, which we don't have to go into a ton of detail on, but I think just to give a sense of that is what you're speaking to is part of the reason why I think we feel so strongly about building the business we have together and having a partner in that and recognizing that not everybody has that or has that available to them, right? So when you talk about the connection with CoJourn, right, part of CoJourn is it's giving you an accountability partner. You're selecting one, or some programs they provide you with one. You have that person that's sort of walking alongside you, even if your goals are different in a totally different world. And I think what we are trying to replicate through Leadership Lab is creating a space where other people who are starting businesses or running things, and maybe they're the single owner and maybe have one or two staff or no staff, or they just are working in isolation all the time. And that isolation makes everything we're talking about really hard to combat sometimes, because that external feedback that we're looking for, it's a lot harder to figure out where to get that, how to get that if you don't have a space for that. And so a piece of why we wanted to create a group like this is to help people have perspective, a space to reflect, challenge themselves, get support, and have some accountability for what they're trying to accomplish in their businesses. So not necessarily being in a space where we're, like you're saying, giving feedback that's giving answers or fixing problems, but really just pointing out the things that you might not be seeing about what you're doing and what might help you leverage your strengths.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating to be able to see when we've seen it in other areas. And we had a conversation today when we were supporting someone in a completely different industry of that you can still have ideas and so come to solutions with people, because you can like Big Hero 6 it and turn it on its axis, just because you can look at things from different angles when you are outside of it.
Right. And so you're just sort of increasing the amount of input and data you get by having multiple sources, by having other brains around you to troubleshoot a problem or give you feedback or just listen to what your struggles have been.
Yeah. And the goal's not certainty, it's trust.
Sure.
And trust that you can use to gather information and help you tolerate that uncertainty. I know that that's something that really helps me, and that can help you make a decision and feel adaptable if necessary. I think this is a really interesting question, especially given our last couple of years. What has uncertainty taught you?
I would say uncertainty has taught me that despite how much I hate it, it's usually the point at which I am just on the edge of like a leap or that next thing. I used to feel very avoidant of uncertainty, of change, of taking risk. and felt like I'm somebody who can just accept what's happening, right? I'm easygoing. I fit in a lot of places. Like, why would I challenge something that is quote unquote working for me? And I would avoid really challenging and doing that big hero six stuff and looking at things from other angles. Like, I was just going to keep one angle and be like, it's fine from this angle. Like, this is good. I don't need to change anything. What's going to bring me peace in my life is to just keep this steady and not change anything. And because that was certain, it was steady, it felt predictable. I was always afraid of change and uncertainty because of the unknown and because of, I might give up something that's working for me. And then where will I be then? And how can I then go back? I hate being wrong. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't have to go back and with my tail between my legs, like, I made the wrong decision. I just want to, like, if this is working and it's good enough, then I'm fine with that. And so what I would say about that is that uncertainty in these last few years has taught me that whether it's for whatever reason it's there, right? A lot of times I think I would find myself in uncertain positions, not as a result of me changing things often because I didn't like to. But if things, sometimes they naturally shift and you really do have to look at it differently. I, through that process, would realize how much better something could get, or that I could bring more into my life that the experience I was having actually maybe wasn't good for me, right? That's like not checking with my gut at all and only living in the headspace of this is fine. And if it's good enough, it's fine. I don't need to change anything, right? That was all very thought driven rather than actually going, is this working for me? How does this work for me? I would avoid that because I think if I listened, I would have said, no, this no longer works for you. You should probably take a step in a different direction. And that felt really scary. So that's my long-winded way of saying I think uncertainty feels like a space where now I don't worry so much about leaning into it. I think it's like, let's just see what happens. And generally, I feel like right on the other side of that is where the magic is.
The growth is.
The growth, the beauty. Like, it can be right on the other side of that really messy middle space. And if you don't get into that messy place, like, you won't know it's there.
What's so interesting about what you said, a couple of things, is first of all, I don't think it was long-winded at all. I think it was just perfect. But also,
thank you.
As you were talking years and years ago, I don't know if I was at a training or watching a video, something. It was a Brene Brown statement, and she said, "Don't engineer your life small." And it was years ago.
Yep.
And I remember that resonating with me pretty deeply. And I thought to myself at that time, like, am I engineering my life small? And my gut check was yes, that there was more, that I should be doing, that I could be doing. And I remember, like, we would joke, like, oh, we should be on Ellen and, like, it's just being silly and all these different things that we could be doing. But there was a part of me that felt like I was playing it safe, but I continued to convince myself that this was because I was getting promotions, because I was continuing to contribute to the community in the way that I was, that it was okay. But if I was honest about myself and did a gut check, like, I was. And so, I still think that there's more to come. But again, as we keep talking about, like, there's more opportunity to not and to engineer my life bigger in the way that it's probably meant to be now. So it's just, I don't know, as you said, that it sort of was a connection to that statement way back.
I love that. I remember those things and talking about that. And I remember that phrase.
It was so long ago and it's always stuck with me. Always. I've always carried that with me and had this, like, inkling in the back of my head that, like, that was something that I was doing and I needed to do something about it. And I feel like I finally am.
I love that. We are, both of us, I think.
I think we are.
I'm glad you brought that up, though. I like that story. And I remember us talking about that. It's so funny because I know I heard the same thing. It definitely didn't stand out to me as much at the same time, but I think I was very avoidant of it.
Sure.
And again, that's sort of I think I've heard that so many times now, and I don't know that I've ever really soaked it in to mean, like, to understand it, I guess. But I think you're exactly right. That's what happens when we do, right? If you were to summarize all of this, like when we stay in our thoughts, I think that is what we do, is we engineer things small. We don't take risk. We don't get outside of ourselves. We just stay on the same path. And it's the path of least resistance sometimes, even though it's not, and it's probably more resistance. I think we tell ourselves that it's
The story we tell ourselves.
exactly is the easier way to go. And when you have data that tells you otherwise because you've actually tried it, you realize that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our takeaways: anxiety and intuition are not the same thing. Anxiety often lives in stories. Intuition often shows up as information. Your nervous system provides valuable data, but data and decisions are not the same thing. Context matters. Wise decisions require both internal awareness and external evidence. Avoidance and impulsivity are often responses to discomfort. Neither automatically leads to clarity. Confidence rarely comes from certainty. Confidence is built through experience, action, and trust. I tell my daughter that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't meant to make every important decision alone. Trusted peers help us see blind spots and possibilities. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Self-trust is built over time. Every decision becomes another piece of evidence that you can navigate what comes next.
So, over these next couple weeks, we want you to think about this. And the next time you're facing a difficult decision, pause and ask yourself, is this a warning sign or is this a worry story? And then ask, what's my body telling me? What are the facts telling me? And what would I advise someone I care about to do?
I love that.
And tell us how it goes for you. Send us a little message.
Exactly.
Throw us a bone.
Throw us a bone. I love that.
Call us up.
And our final closing thought is, maybe the goal isn't to eliminate anxiety. Maybe the goal is learning to listen closely enough that anxiety no longer gets the final vote. And maybe trusting yourself isn't about knowing exactly what's ahead. Maybe it's knowing you'll be able to meet whatever comes next.
You got this.
You got this.
All right. We will see you next time.
See you next time.